already info in WOW, I guess. He is the Chief Executive of Islington GP Federation. Now, I've already had one or two people come up to me and say, what is that exactly? And I thought, well, that's why we come to find out. So, over to you.
Hello. Can everybody see me? Or do I go more central? I'll stand up for a while. So, good morning. Thanks for inviting me to spend some time with you this morning. I spend a lot of time here, actually, in this building, so I know it's a great resource. And the NHS seems to book it for lots and lots of events. I just want to stress one thing. I do not work for the NHS. I don't run the NHS. So I can hear what you say, I can take stuff back, but I run a small organisation that sits within the infrastructure of the NHS, which is what I'm going to try to explain to you. I think it's a really important organisation. We're very proud of it. So there's some slides which will bring that to life, hopefully, and then we can have whatever discussion after that you wish. How many here of you have got a GP in Islington? Okay. So it's quite important for this group, I think. And I'll explain the rationale for the creation through the slides, for the creation of the organisation. Also just want to sort of stress that it's important to me as well, not just professionally, but I brought a family up in Islington. I moved up over the hill into Crouch End, I'm afraid to say, about 10 years ago, for a big garden. But my heart lies here. I feel very passionate about it. I had a career, 35 years of working in media, technology, all sorts of some large organisations before I settled on doing this work because I feel it's really important. And it was one of those accidental things. So I worked for the BBC, I worked for AOL, I was on the board of large organisations, spent quite a few years, consulting, helping organisations to adapt and get the most out of this developing digital stuff, trying to make sense of it, trying not to run before it could walk, and making smart use of technology. That was sort of my background. I'm a designer by training, product designer, and that's what I brought to the setup of this small organisation. We can talk about that later, because I had nothing to do with the health sector until 2015, when this began. And I think there's some benefits for being able to ask really stupid questions every day. I think we should all remember that. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. So I got involved by accident. A friend of mine is a GP, and he said, you do pitches and things like that, don't you? And could you help me with one? And that was for a programme, Prime Minister's Extended Access Programme. It's David Cameron at the time, and it was to try to develop pilot services to extend GP opening hours into the evening, and on Saturday and Sunday, 12 hours each day, and to cover bank holidays. And we did it first in 2014 and failed miserably, and then we tenaciously did it again the following year and was successful. And we set up an organisation which was 5 strong to try to get this thing off the ground. Now on a monthly basis, Islington GP Federation employs about 350 people. So it's not massive, but it's pretty big. And people work largely in Islington, but we also extend with part of North Central London, or the acronym is NCL. That's the health system. So we work, most of our work is for the NHS, 95% of the work. The rest of it will be for some sort of public funding, whether it's working for council, or King's Fund, or whatever it might be. So that's sort of what it is. And what I want to take you through is a presentation that I did with some colleagues, a couple of GPs, at the end of last year, to the Council's Health and Scrutiny Committee. And that's a committee that's set up to ask questions on a periodic basis of certain organisations within the system which need to be held to account. We have done it 2 or 3 times, and let's just check this works. So this is a presentation. You can see top right that the 2 GPs, with David Edgerton, who's from River Place. There we go. And Grace McGeer, who works at Barnsley. And both of them work with me in various ways to help develop integrated services. David is a board member of Islington GP Federation, and we did this presentation. I've abbreviated it and simplified it because it's quite dense. It's still quite dense, and I'm going to try to bounce through it quite quickly. So I'll just read your faces. If anybody nods off, I'll go faster. If people keep going, I'll slow down. Bear with me. So it is a large-scale general practice organisation. It's not prescribed by the system, by the NHS. There isn't a federation everywhere. In 2017, there was a programme to try to encourage practices across, remember, GP practices are all privately owned small businesses, and there was a programme to encourage practices in particular areas, geographic groups, to work inside a federation-type organisation nationally. That programme has spawned some successful organisations like this. Many are very dormant, and many cease to exist. So it's sort of random whether they've come through. What the NHS likes to have, obviously, is a blueprint nationally for an infrastructure and system that is prescribed and funded, all the rest of it. So this is a little bit of an anomaly. The form of this organisation, what it does, it's not alone, but it's important because it does some things in particular ways that we believe in Islington are really important to avoid being done to by the system. We'll talk about the vision of the organisation, but it is large scale, it's attempting to make connections and bring things together. It's owned by all but one eligible Islington GP practice. So the various practices that aren't eligible, for instance, Islington GP Federation now runs 4 practices which it has rescued, which would have gone bust. And they can't be shareholders in the organisation because IGPF actually owns them. 65% of any profits at the end of the year automatically go back into patient care. The remainder could be distributed as dividends, but that has never happened, and it never will happen. As far as the board is concerned, it's very unlikely that that will ever happen. Its shares can't be traded, and they also can't be owned by organisations, by companies. So if you think practices are partnerships, limited companies cannot own. So companies like Babylon and AT Medics, which some of you will have heard of, quite controversial organisations in various ways, can't be shareholders of this organisation. So this organisation is set up in Islington to protect Islington general practice. It's formed by the GPs that some of you know, most of you put your hands up, so you have sort of skin in the game. As I said, most of the activity is NHS funded. And as I said, it was encouraged around 2017. This large-scale general practice organisation was an idea, but it was very difficult. It's very difficult to make new models like this get traction across a national footprint. Really, really tough. I mean, it makes sense. One can understand that. Just a quick reminder, basically, there are currently 31 GP practices in Islington. Each one is its own organisation. 4 of them as I said, are run by IGPF currently because they would otherwise have gone to the wall. They're formed now into 5 GP networks. They're called primary care networks. So this, like that federation program, this is a subsequent program that's been running for 5 years to get practices to work together. So you can see, for instance, N1, there are 4 practices that are contracted to one another. They work together to do certain things, and they receive some funding as a single entity to do certain things. So that's a move by the NHS towards these small individual businesses which have huge variation from being absolutely excellent to not great. And this is an attempt to cluster them into forms where they can raise the quality, potentially being more cost effective, and make better use of technology. There's all sorts of benefits from it, which I believe in. And then the ambition is for there to be localities, 3 localities across Islington. This is a national NHS scheme, but it's also something that councils have bought into to varying degrees nationally. So Islington, the local authority, the council, has also agreed to these 3 localities. They're agreed to the health system and the social care system and the council overarching. So it's north, central, south. They're based around wards, and as we go forward, it's likely that more investment will be centred on each of those localities to try to enhance this, to make more sense of the different offerings that there are in each part of Islington. So I was, of course, talking to a couple of people here, who were saying it's so hard to understand what there is available, and the system finds it incredibly hard to maintain and to communicate what is available. There's over 2,000 voluntary organisations in Islington who we work with. Fantastic range of voluntary sector organisations, and how they stitch into social care and health systems. Making sense of that is very hard if you live in the north of Islington. It is different to in the south. And then across the whole, Islington GP Federation has a role to try to provide glue, to try to build partnerships with the acutes, trusts, with the council, with the voluntary sector, across north central London, so to try to make sense of this move in the round schema towards a better system that's less random. So that's the principle. Our vision, you can read that. It's probably not something that anybody here would want to disagree with. It's a positive, optimistic statement of intent, and it hasn't changed. The two verbs, to ensure that and to shape how, have been introduced. It used to be to support, but actually as the organisation becomes stronger and more actively participating in leadership of the changes that are happening in Islington's health and social care, we've strengthened it, that we will ensure and we will shape how these systems are improved. How this circle has disappeared off the screen now, but how that circle gets enacted. The new government believes in this as well, so there's continuity across policy, which is good. So the move towards more integration, more proactive care, all of the good stuff remains. But what the strategic people in the NHS and the Department of Health find it impossible to understand is how to do things. So Islington GP Federation is set up as a doing organisation. We do stuff. We're not a bureaucratic organisation. We're a design-led organisation. And we'll talk about this now. So what do? We provide patient-centred service provider focus. There's lots of bureaucrats in the NHS, as you can well imagine. In fact, how many people here have worked in the NHS? Thank you. Okay, less than I thought actually. I thought, because it's a big, big system. But all of you will understand. So you put your hands up. It is a system that's designed to be safe and solid and immovable. So being adaptable to the future is really hard for it. And organisations like the one that we've created attempt to sort of push and cajole and make sense to show that things are working or to prove that they're not working on the ground, and then to get the big system to go, okay, yeah, we hear that. And it can be responsive if you're able to articulate back up the chain. We've tested this with 250,000 patients in Islington, North London, with the broadest range of economic and health prospects, and we can tell you this is what it looks like and feels like for the population of Islington, for the residents. And it does get heard, but you can't do it every week. You have to be really careful about how you communicate back and forth. It's design and partner-led. So the NHS does not fund good design. And I had a conversation with Margaret, I think, when we were talking on the phone about the fact that, a lot of the conversations, a lot of the issues around controversy around the NHS is obviously about funding. It's an extraordinarily expensive system. There's an extraordinary amount of natural wastage. However, there is so much you can do with really good design. And good design, in my experience, doesn't get its fair share of funding within the NHS. It's a sort of expectation that it's done. Now, my background is in design, and it doesn't happen like that. So we're constantly pushing the notion that you have to really think and design systems. You will all be aware of the move towards digital access to get an appointment with your GP. And probably, we all share the frustration from our experiences doing that. One of the issues there was somebody decided when the pandemic hit to flip the switch, essentially on digital access, online consultation. It hadn't been tested. So it was executed, and that caused, of course, as we know, some terrible press and terrible bad press for GPs. Actually, GPs just got given it. That was a mandate. You will now be, the access to GP surgery will be moving towards online access. There's nothing wrong with online access, actually, if it's done well, if it's designed well, if it's tested with residents and all the rest of it. And that's what we've been doing over the past year and a half. And the conversion of it is incredibly successful. People love it when it works. And when it works for them, people say, this really helps me to get to the right person more quickly. So, design and partnering, we can't do anything without partnership. That's one thing I've learned outside health and business. You cannot move forward and progress without working in collaborative forms. And they're difficult to make work. Working with the hospitals, with secondary care, with CNI, Mental Health Trust, all of those organisations, they're built to be steady. So creating pragmatic, fast-moving partnership is really difficult, and we have a focus on that. So our job is to help make doctors better connected and supported and more integrated into the Islington health system. I'll talk about that. Oh, and we won some awards. So this is a while back now, but we did win the Health and Communities award, national award during the 70th anniversary of the NHS. So that was really nice because that award was all about integrated systems and driving change. So that we're particularly proud of that because that was sort of symbolic, right at the heart of what we tried to do. I'm going to now bounce through these. We have a list. I think there are 6 or 7 things, categories of things that we do. I'll go into some examples. So we provide Islington service delivery. We do things. We provide services. As I said, one of those is practices. So Barnsbury was a practice that we took over at the start of 2021. That was a failed practice, and we're very proud that CQC gave us good when they reviewed it, I think a year and a half after we'd taken it over, and we're particularly pleased that they gave it an outstanding for leadership, and leadership was what that practice needed. It was in a really poor state of affairs for patients who were being underserved, and it's not anymore, which is really pleasing. Northern Medical Centre we took on last year, that sort of fell apart, the partnership fell apart for all sorts of reasons, which are not worth going into now, but it was very pleasing when the Gazette published the latest ratings on practices, and in fact both Barnsbury and the Northern came in at 81%. I can't remember what the 81% means, I think it's 81% would recommend to a friend. City Road we took over the 1st of April, and that's a sort of steady state, we're letting that settle in. And then Handley Medical Practice we took on when 80 medics lost that practice on the 1st of July. And what's really pleasing is the end of month one, this is what's called Friends and Family Survey, which you will have seen when you go to your practice or online and fill in a questionnaire. And this is just very simply excellent, very poor. And the excellence has gone up and the very poor has gone down. So we're really chuffed about that. That's after 4 weeks. So that's the impact one can have. And part of that is changing the digital experience. So we've learned 2 years, we've been testing how to do online consultations, and we applied them here and people really noticed it. The impact for patients was significant. We also do lots of things that GPs can't do and that hospitals struggle to do. And this is an example of this. This is a service working with the council to help homeless in Islington get care from primary care. You can imagine if you're homeless, it's really hard to be registered, it's really hard to see a doctor, and of course, people who are living on the streets have a much shorter expectation in terms of their longevity. And if you're going to be an NHS system person, they also cost a lot of money. But more importantly, these are people whose quality of life could be improved if they could get some help. And we found people who haven't seen a GP for 15 years. And most importantly, we persuade them to go back at least 2 times to see a GP. That's enormous success. And this is a small team of people co-funded by the NHS and the council to bring that partnership together and find the people who are so passionate. And you can see these are the sorts of organisations that we work with to deliver it. This will grow. I think this is perceived to be a real success story. This is similar. This is severe mental illness. Again, these people in this category of mental health status die on average 20 years earlier than the local average, actually. And to be able to get them seen in primary care, to persuade them and to cajole them and to build the trust to get them to get that care is incredibly hard to do. Again, this is a team of people. It's a mix of pharmacists, a couple of mental health nurses, and a bunch of other people who work together. It's a team of about 7 people, and they're literally on bikes, as well as working with the patient list that CNI had. Fantastic team of people who are giving the support to work together and create this amazing force. And they should all be knighted. Or something. So we do lots of services. I have also, I meant to mention, which is what the Cameron pilot that we won is 10 next year. So I hope most people have used that at some point. That's weekday evenings, Saturday, Sunday, bank holidays. If you need to see a GP, the service is there. It's at Laycock Street, Ritchie Street, I think it's at Andover. So that still exists. And what was breakthrough with that was getting all the practices to open up their records, your records, for a doctor there to be able to put into your record what had happened. We all know it's so unbelievable to go to hospital and you realise for the first time they don't have access to your the record within the doctor. It's such a frustration. So gradually, inch by inch, we're trying to help the system to be more integrated, and for the point at the point of care to be able to enable technologically people to be able to access the record. This is an example of what we do. We support practices. As I said, they're all individual businesses, those 31 practices, apart from the 4, so that's 27. It's been really tough. It's really, really tough running practice. I'm not going to get political, but the money has really reduced. The money's reduced, the expectations have increased. We have had to take on 4 practices which would have gone under. This is a big practice, I won't name it. We put a finance team in there at the start of this year. And, excuse me, and as the GP partner wrote to us, there was a very real risk to the organisation that we would have gone under without that support. If our organisation didn't exist, that is a practice of almost 20,000 patients that could have disappeared. The NHS does not provide financial support for practices when they get to this point. This is another example of the sort of system work that we're doing. As I said, the digital access thing was sort of launched opportunistically, I suppose, when the pandemic hit. What we've been doing for 2 years is trying to learn how we, as patients, can get the most out of that and can be reassured and can be helped. And the outcome of this work is utterly fantastic, and that's being written into a white paper somewhere nationally. But you know, the big question with digital tools is how to continue to offer continuity care. That's the big question. You know, people bluntly, both the Mail and the Guardian, on certain days will say, you know, the digital shift will take away the opportunity for continuity care. I can assure you that the practices prior to the digital arrival of quite significant digital change, small practices where people do not get continuity care that you might get from your GP. So continuity care is a really controversial and complicated issue, and what we're trying to do is to get the balance right, to showcase, to prove, to build evidence, to get the residents' view how to get the balance right. And then we'll tell the NHS how to do it. We've got more involved in the leadership of the system, and that's what happens when you're good at doing stuff on the ground. You get listened to because you've got provenance of doing things. The system does like that if you can get on with it and do it and showcase it. If you've been to your practice, you really, well, all of you that are Islington GP patients, you will probably have encountered a pharmacist. There is now a new role called a practice-based pharmacist that was sort of, again, prescribed, encouraged by the NHS, but very difficult to make happen. It was a new thing. 4 years ago, doctors said, nah, we don't need pharmacists in practice. We do that work. They're not to be trusted. They should stay in boots and things like that. You know, that was a sense. People don't like change. So we've now got a team of 60 pharmacists across Islington, and we employ. We develop their career. They've got a fantastic pharmacist lead. They love being the part of the whole, but they also work in 1 or 2 practices. That's their home. They work in practice, and they're the ones that do the asthma reviews and all the other reviews that we have that call to say, checking on your meds and all of that work. They're brilliant at it. That's what they study. That's the science they know. Medicines, how to use them, pharmaceuticals. They're brilliant sets of people. They're so smart, and they're in the right place now. We also manage the contracts with organisations like this. So these partnerships that I talked about, actually these are quite difficult beasts to sign a contract with. And they're all different culturally. So as a team, we've got a fantastic group of people who are good at negotiating, whether it's London Ambulance, or whether it's Whittington, whether it's UCLH. We know how to contract for primary care to get a commitment from them to deliver what they say they will commit. And then finally, in this section as examples, we're doing a lot of technology work to try to help all these individual businesses, these practices, to understand how to better manage, a bit like retail or banking or any other business, how to manage the demand. It's not rocket science, but a practice on the ground, wherever it is up the road, has not got the time in the day to start figuring out the number crunching. So we've got analysts who work and support our member practices to better understand what the demand looks. It's not just Monday morning that's busy. It doesn't work like that. It's more complex than that. So we help them to understand how to deploy their staff for the purpose of supporting the patients and which staff are most important and can do the job effectively. And we help them then to recruit those people. Do a lot of training. So this is the training hub, this is Islington Training Hub, this is NHS funded, but we work with the academy, which is the Islington Health Academy, Health and Social Care Academy, which is the council's training initiative. And this is an example which we're very proud of. Get ready to work. So this is trying to help people, residents of Islington, who are not employed, who might have fallen behind and not had an opportunity for any further education. We work with London Met, for instance, and they get an opportunity to develop how to work, for instance, in general practice, to become really professional, and then we get them jobs. Such a simple, it sounds simple and logical. It's early. We've been doing it for a couple of years. 80% of the people who come through it end up working in a practice. It's a really good news story. And some of the people are in groups that really, they may have stayed unemployed for a long while, like that. So it's a real opportunity for them. We do a lot of digital support development, and I won't bang on about this because it's just a bit boring, but it's the engine room. Really understanding how effective people's care, practices care for their patients is. The NHS does a lot, and it's sort of based around the funding. So if you do your annual reviews of your COPD patients, you will notice that you get, you get texts and things like that in March for you to go get your review because they get paid in April. Actually, what we're trying to do is to ensure practices are able to have a month-by-month recall system. So all of that digital stuff we do for them. Almost there. It's worth just saying, the pandemic, we're really proud of what we were able to do because we're on the ground doing stuff. We were able to do 10,000 vaccinations in the weekend at the Emirates in partnership with the police, London Ambulance, the council, the hospitals, everything. We took the lead with that, and this was the Finsbury Park where King Charles is, prior to being king. This is our pharmacy lead, actually, meeting him, talking about the work we did there for that community. So all of the vaccination work that happened in Islington, we took on responsibility for. And I think that's a reflection of being able to be pragmatic and fast. And then finally, we do other things as well. So this, we provide a community gynecology service across several boroughs and a community ENT service across several boroughs. And that is trying to get activity out of the hospitals. Both of those are full of procedures that do not need you to be in hospital. Who wants to go in hospital for a routine that you don't need to have in hospital? And it's really hard to get that shift because the hospitals quite like to keep it. That's changing now, and it's partly changing. I had a meeting with the chief executive of UCLH yesterday, where he gave his blessing to certain developments. And what's also exciting, those red dots are the GPs who work in the gynecology service. And you probably can't see, but they work across North Central London. So each of those GPs is working in a practice, maybe 3 days a week, and then 2 days a week they're working in the gynecology service. It's like a special responsibility. That keeps them more likely to stay in general practice for longer. And if they're a woman, when they have a child, if they have a child, that they will want to come back more quickly and more readily. So the dynamic of sort of retention of that important workforce is so important. The boring stuff, we have a board. We have a board which is a mix of GPs and other people who work in practices. We also have 2 lay members, who some of you who have been involved in the health system in Islington will probably recognise their names. And we don't need to go into the detail of it, but we do everything we need to do to be safe, secure, steady, to protect your data, and all of those good things, so that we can be fast moving and do things that other parts of the system find it really impossible to do. And finally, this is Janice. Janice featured in an ad campaign for the NHS recently, because Janice is just really, really good at what she does. And she's a care coordinator. So she is the sort of person who, through this digital stuff, you want to end up talking to, because Janice can really help you to find your way around the system. And the way you want to be might be in housing, in the council. Your issue might not be a health issue. And that's a really common trend, that doctors, your GP, is often the only place that residents feel they can get to when it's hard to contact the council. So people like Janice, who really understand the whole system, are so important. We're trying to develop these people. So remember that Get Ready to Work programme that we're doing with the council. People like Janice, who's lived in Islington her whole life, knows the hood, and she really wants to help patients, residents, to get to the right place first time. I'll stop, I think. Yes, there we go. And there may be issues that arise here. There may be more broad NHS issues that you want to discuss. It's 11:15, so I'm not sure how long we've got. 15 minutes. So I'm very thick-skinned. You can ask me anything at all. But as I said, I don't run the NHS. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, first question.
Where is it?
Right on front.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I guess we have to be pleased that the Islington GP Federation works in Islington, but isn't it in a sense a criticism of the whole NHS that this isn't general policy overall?
Yes. It's a shame, isn't it? And our focus, this is really hard stuff to make happen. Our focus is on this. So we've spent so many thousands of hours living with that frustration and the pain. And how do we evangelise, as I'm doing now, how do we evangelise the benefits of making this happen? There's no parents for this. You know, the NHS doesn't tell us how to do this. We're having to do it on the ground, to be smart, to be tenacious, to take a lot of hits. And all we can do is tell that story. I suppose our ambition is for there to be a case study of, not a blueprint of how to do it. The problem with this is it's probably different in every area. If you're in a rural or a suburban area, it'll be a different sort of structure, different relationships with the different health systems. So it's a really tough conundrum, and it's not the same in each of the boroughs. You know, we've got 5 boroughs in NCL, so there's Islington, Camden, Barnet, Enfield and Harrogate. The last 3 are quite different to Islington and Camden, for obvious reasons, and each of those has a federation, but they're all quite different. We've stopped you're right, we've stopped worrying about it. We have to just focus on us and keep strengthening that and make sure the money keeps coming in to allow us to do it. Then the question is, how do we tell the good stories, win some awards, and get heard? Yeah. Thank you.
I find the geography of Islington really problematic. I was a hospital consultant looking after people with diabetes at Whittington, and the problem is that the Whittington is right on the edge of Islington, and so Hornsey overlap, which featured in many NHS plans in the 20th century, didn't count as part of Islington. And if you go up to the top of where the Whittington is, you've got Hackney as well as Haringey, and Barnet as well. So when hospitals are designed according to where they have operated for generations, and GP federations or GP practices are organised on their locality basis, it's very difficult indeed to get communication across boroughs, across health authorities. I live in Tufnell Park and my GP is in Camden, so I have nothing to do with the GP Federation as a consumer. Is there any way in which GP federations can lead the way to integration in some way? Because this is really important when we're speaking about increasing the funding of general practice from the 8% it gets at the moment to 15%, because in each individual area is going to be dealing with a different hospital in most urban areas. If you're in somewhere rural where there is a hospital in the middle of the city and there's a catchment area around it, it's a lot easier to sort out. What can you do about geography?
I won't say again what a caveat to all of this about my reach, if you like. But I mean, the conversation I was having with David Probert yesterday at UCLH was about gynecology services. The gynecology demands are high, and the hospitals are really struggling to provide the services that we all deserve. And geography was a big part of that. So there's UCLH, there's Whittington, there's Royal Free Group, okay, so that includes Barnet, etc. There's North Mid, etc. There's a whole range of hospitals in a very concentrated area. All have different cultures and ranges of service. What we're trying to work on is how to jump outside borough for certain things, and the same could arguably should apply for diabetic care. But there are ideas that come down from up there, and Wes will no doubt be finding many of those, local diagnostics in the community and all those sorts of schemes. But the acutes tend to like to design and run those. So one of the tensions is that there is something called the NHS Health Alliance now, NCL, sorry, North Central London Health Alliance, and that is essentially run by the acutes, so the hospitals, and they are trying to develop services that span across North Central London. Now, even if you do North Central London, then you've got North West London border with that, so you will always have a border where a patient is going to be compromised, the service they get. But our job is to work really closely with that alliance to make sense of stuff. David's really significant in that alliance. We're working with David to figure out how best to deploy in that area. And I think it's going to be case by case, depending on whether it's ENT or ophthalmology or whatever the specialty is, to start to figure out how patients would be better served by having those services in the community and what the geography should best look like. And in Islington, people don't like to go more than a mile. If you go to, I don't know, Mansfield, people would have a different answer to that. They would be used to travelling 30 miles. So we've also got that mixed economy of expectation that patients have. So it's one of the big conundrums, but we're trying to crack it again on the ground in this case across North Central London, I think is a good place to focus.
Thank you. Two questions at this side and then one over here.
Thank you. Hello. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello.
So you talked a lot about digital access. I'm not a lover of it, but as it seems to function within the practice where I'm a patient, I'd say it could be worse, so I think it's a very important topic, and as we're a group for older people, what I'm very interested in is what work the Federation is doing around enabling less digitally literate older people, helping them to access care. They're still familiar with the older, possibly better, probably better, but the older way of doing things. I'm reasonably intelligent, confident, and digitally literate, to a point. So I can use it. But every time I do, I think about those older people like us who haven't got a clue, and I'm very concerned about them. Could you explain, please, what the Federation is doing there? Thank you.
Thank you. And it's not just age. Obviously there's cultural range and diversity.
Yes.
First language. There are lots of limiters on ease of familiarity to using digital tools. There's also inevitably there are lots of models of digital tools. So the NHS in London is constantly looking at the different software, and that software ranges enormously. So how that gets deployed is time consuming, and you want to be in a room and have a fight over. So we're trying to be software neutral. So we're testing lots of different pieces of software, and they range from our favourite software at the moment is eConsult, because we use it a lot. And the benefit of eConsult, for instance, is if you can do it yourself online from the website, it's quite sophisticated, and it gets you quite quickly to what you need, because the clinical assurance of the information you give is good. Remember, if you just fill in a form that just says blah, 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 you will not answer the questions that a GP or a clinical triage person would actually ask. So you need to